Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday night Q&A. We're so glad that you have joined us this evening as we will continue to talk about the qualifications of an elder. We're so glad that Dustin has joined us this evening. Again, Dustin, good morning, good afternoon.
What's up,
To me,
Matt?
to
How
me,
are
it's
you,
already
buddy?
good afternoon, man. It's 4 o'clock
I
here.
know.
For you, it's
Gotcha.
early yet.
Yes.
I hope you're doing well. Hope your family is doing
Mm-hmm.
well. Glad,
Excellent.
glad you're
Thank you,
joining
man.
us as we
Glad
talk
to
about
see you.
qualifications of an elder.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. So, Dustin, we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago here, and we'll go ahead and announce here to the folks watching that we will do a 3-month series on the Book of Revelation that will start very, very soon. We'll, post information on YouTube and Facebook as well. So just be on the lookout as we'll dive into that book. There's a lot for us to learn from that. However,
Yeah.
Dustin, today we are talking about qualifications of an elder. That's something that 2 weeks ago we kick off talking about it. Then last week we kind of had to put a hold on it because of our gospel meeting. And now we are
Indeed.
back here, Dustin, talking about the qualifications of an elder. Dustin, is this topic relevant in your opinion?
Oh man, big time, big time, big time. We hopefully quickly we established last week that the Lord wants churches to have elders. This is something
Mm-hmm.
that churches need to aspire to. I think last week I mentioned that Paul told Timothy that he needed to set in order the things that were lacking. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I meant Paul told that to Titus.
Okay.
We have First Timothy 3, Titus chapter 1, as kind
Mm-hmm.
of back and forth parts to talk about elder qualifications. So sometimes it's a little challenging to keep who said
Yep.
what to whom straight. But the bottom line is, yes, of course, the Lord wants this for his people. The Lord's people should want this for themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
this idea that we do just fine without elders, this really needs to be purged from a Christian's mind
Mm-hmm.
because that is not the way the Lord wants us to be thinking about this topic.
Absolutely. So last week we talked about blameless, husband of
Mm-hmm,
one wife,
mm-hmm,
diligent, sober,
mm-hmm,
good
mm-hmm.
behavior, given to hospitality, apt to
Right, right,
teach, and then we
right, right.
stopped there because we were running out of time. And then today
Indeed.
we kick off back again, Dustin, by talking about not given to wine. And
Uh-huh.
Dustin,
Uh-huh.
this one in the church, I think it is as complicated as it is the husband of one wife. A lot of people have
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
opinions about not given to wine. What let's dive into the word here, but Dustin,
Yeah.
but talk a little bit more about this. What are your thoughts here on not given to wine?
Yes. Keeping it here with the qualifications of an elder, it reads pretty clearly. The Lord does not want his elders given to wine. There's a subtle difference that a lot of viewers will probably know between this qualification here and one given to deacons. I know that has generally been kind of taken advantage of by some to claim that, well, the deacons can drink, but the elders cannot drink alcohol. Uh, I
Mm-hmm.
think that is I think that is a baseless claim and not very sound comparison. Truth of the matter is, the Lord wants none of us to be drinking alcohol. This is established quite plainly, I think, in passages like Ephesians chapter 5, which let us know that we should not be drunk with this kind of intoxicating wine. I know
Mm-hmm.
some people will you know, kind of insert maybe a straw man argument here and say, well, you see, you can drink as long as you don't get drunk. This
Exactly.
is usually where people go. You can drink as long as you don't get drunk. And that never has impressed me as a life philosophy. Just just the real short back of the envelope explanation. How do you know where that line is, and who draws that line? Like where I live here in the state of South Carolina, according to the law, you're drunk after a drink or two, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By legal operating a car standards, I mean, you would be drunk. Well, people who want to drink, they they don't want that to be the line. One or two drinks is not is not where they want the line to be. They want something that is more akin to like passing out, falling down, clumsy, stumbling, drunk.
Hmm.
So it should be pretty obvious to anybody who knows a thing or two about the Lord that He is not imprecise like this.
Absolutely.
So back to not given to wine. The ESV says not a drunkard, and this is a process, of course, as people have heard preachers say countless times before. This is a process that begins with the very first sip, the very first drink. Therefore, for many sound reasons, this is to be avoided in any amount, completely, totally by Christians, and also, of course, by those who would be elders.
Absolutely. You know this, and as you talk about this, a passage comes to my mind, which is Galatians chapter 5.
Indeed.
Galatians chapter 5, for those of you watching from
I
home,
think I
I'm
said
reading
Ephesians earlier. I meant Galatians. Yeah.
Galatians. Yeah, Galatians chapter 5, verses 19. I'll start reading 19 thus, and the Bible says, now the works of the flesh are evident, which are
Mhm.
adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred,
Mhm.
contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, self-ambition, dissensions, heresies, envy, murder.
Mhm.
And check this one out, Dustin. Drunkenness.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Dustin, because at the end of verse 21, the Bible says that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of
That's
heaven.
right.
So, for those of you watching this evening with us, and you are wondering with yourself, well, it's just a sip of wine or a sip of beer or
Mhm.
whatever beverage it could be. Um, Dustin, it seems like we're playing with fire. You're just walking
Indeed.
in the edge of a cliff, and I don't think that's the way to go about it. The Bible is very clear that those who practice
Yeah.
drunkenness will not inherit
A
the
hun-
kingdom of heaven.
Absolutely, you're right. Absolutely, you're right. And as you're reading from Galatians 5:21, Paul says, "and such like." That's a
Hmm.
King James express, and such
Hmm.
like. So, I sometimes ask people this question: is drinking as much as you can without getting drunk, is that such like drinking for the purpose of getting drunk? I mean, those two things are practically the same. You're drinking, but saying, "Oh, I'm going to stop before I've had too much," which, let's face it, you don't. I mean, in order for you to know where to stop, you've had to cross that line. It's crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, so I'm going to drink as much as I possibly can without getting drunk, and that's going to keep me safe from violating the command to not get drunk. Read Paul again.
Hmm.
Galatians 5. Also, I
Hmm.
was I was correct earlier when I mentioned Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5:18, of course, talks about not getting drunk with this intoxicating wine.
Hmm.
So the strategy of, hey, I'm going to drink as much as I can without getting drunk because it's wrong to get drunk. No, if you break down these works of the flesh like you should,
Hmm.
it's wrong to even do those things that are like the things that he
Yeah.
describes.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
so it's one of those characteristics that, at the end of the day, not only apply to elders, Dustin, but I think we have to agree with each other. It applies to the whole
Right.
church. The whole
That,
church,
that's that's exactly right. That's a great way to bring it back to First Timothy chapter 3. Yes, this is clearly a quotation for one who would be an elder, obviously. Also, you and I think, and we teach correctly from the Bible using its passages in context, that
Hmm.
this is something that no Christian should be doing. Indeed.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dustin. I think that's a great way to put it. And now, Dustin, let me ask you this question though,
Mm,
because I have heard people in the past saying, "Well, but my doctor has prescribed me something that contains alcohol in it." I know they're
yeah.
very. I think we could spend the next hour just talking about
Oh,
wine
sure,
and
sure,
drinking here. I know that's
sure.
not the topic here, but perhaps some people
Yes.
watching here this evening, that's one thing that they will come to their minds. They'll say, "Well, but." The doctor told me to
Timothy
use
was
this.
told to take a little wine for his stomach's sake and his infirmities, so on and so forth. This is an area that is interesting, I would say. I think modern medicine has really come a long way. Now there are some medicines on the market that I'm afraid of,
Hmm.
and making an elder point here, I think it would be worth discussing and mentioning that if a man is prescribed mood altering,
Hmm.
mind altering, behavior altering, let's say medicines.
Absolutely.
If a man is so medicated that his judgment is not always sound, that he's not always in control of his behavior. If a
Hmm.
man is so medicated to this extent, and let's face it, a lot of people, especially here in the U.S., are in this boat where they're heavily medicated,
Hmm.
that man maybe should not be considered for an elder.
For the
Uh,
job.
his
Absolutely.
his uh, his health condition may put him in a similar category that First Timothy chapter 3 describes.
Hmm.
You know, I'm not a doctor, neither are you. I
Right.
would say if somebody's drinking a glass of alcoholic wine or two a day, claiming some sort of medical benefit, this is this is not sound medicine.
Hmm.
If your doctor's telling you to do that, get a second opinion.
Absolutely.
I think all who speak about drinking wine for health purposes, they're a little agenda driven. If we're being honest,
Yes.
they want to drink
Yes.
the wine. Are they out walking every day like their doctors tell them to? Are they avoiding fatty fried food like their doctors tell them to? It really gets strange how people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I drink wine because it's so good for you." Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
you
is
you
walking.
sit down,
Yeah.
yeah, and you sit
And so
down
is
and eat a
swimming.
bag of potato chips or
Yeah.
or a whole container of Oreo cookies.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
Exactly.
Let's not fool ourselves or try to fool anyone else
Hmm.
into this. Those who study the harmful effects of alcohol, they don't say drink a glass or two a day for your
Exactly.
heart health. They don't do
Exactly.
that.
As
As
a
a
matter
matter
of
of fact,
fact.
they all unanimously warn
Mhm.
that the risks far outweigh any small benefit there might be. And by the way, you could probably get that same benefit from grape juice
From grape juice.
and moderate exercise. Again,
Yep.
not a doctor speaking to you here tonight, but you get where I'm coming from.
I was gonna say the exact same thing, Dustin. I've researched this many times, and I see more negative than positive from having a glass of wine or whatever it may be, a time or twice a day. So yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So
Because a
stick with the
glass of
walking.
wine turns into two, turns into three, turns whatever.
Yeah.
Walking around the block,
Yeah.
you're not going to overdo that.
Exactly.
And if you do overdo that, it'll be better for you.
And Dustin, is one of those things that if you make a mistake, your salvation is in risk.
Mm.
If you're drinking too much, we just read the Bible says your salvation is in risk. So why are we going to,
There's a fine
be?
line between I'm going to drink as much as I possibly can without
Hmm.
getting drunk. This is not this is not the way to approach your relationship with the
No,
Lord.
it is not.
I'm going to I'm going to do as much as I can do without crossing the line. Not to blend our topics here, but
Hmm.
a lot of young people, a lot of teenagers kind of find themselves in that boat with a different activity. We're going to get as close as we can to the line without doing anything wrong, and that often does not end well, let's
It
say.
doesn't. And Dustin, if that's the approach we're going to have with the Lord, then what kind of conversion did we go through? Because I
Exactly.
understand, God, I devoted my life to you through baptism, but at the same time, I like the world so much that
So
I
much.
want to have as much of the world as I possibly can without losing you. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not the way to go about it, Dustin. I don't
Yeah,
think I don't think that conversion is it's all about that. He's not.
That certainly doesn't sound like a new man. That sounds like a lot of the old man you're dragging behind you, right?
Exactly.
And James, maybe one final word on the topic. James lets us know in his very short practical epistle that just friendship with the world puts us in enmity with God. So, in other
Absolutely.
words, in order to have a bad relationship with the world, we don't have to go out and do a lot of bad things. That's certainly one way to get a bad relationship with God. But you also get a bad relationship with God just by doing too many worldly things.
Absolutely, Dustin. Absolutely. So let's move on here. There's a lot for us to cover here over the next couple of minutes. Not violent. Now, this one
Yeah.
seems quite obvious, quite straightforward to
Mm-hmm.
the point. It would be
Mm-hmm.
bad for us to have an elder in the church. First argument he has with someone, he ends up getting on a fight. And have you ever seen that before, Dustin, in your many years of ministry?
No, not
Good.
a physical altercation. Thank the good Lord. Some instances maybe have gotten close. I don't know. But certainly, a man needs to be a self-controlled. I mean,
Absolutely.
this is a quality of being an elder. You know, I think I think it would be helpful to do a slightly deeper dive here and say, hey, getting worked up, getting animated, raising your voice even. Some people
Mhm.
think it's incredibly unchristian to point your finger and to holler at somebody, or it's incredibly ungentle or unmeek. I don't know if I'm making up words here, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Some people
absolutely.
think it's incredibly unmeek or ungentle or unchristian to raise your voice, to talk over somebody, to
hmm
tell somebody, hey, you need to stop saying that.
hmm
Well, these are things that we see a lot of Bible heroes doing. As a matter of fact,
hmm hmm
um, you know, as we dig deeper into elders, we understand that one of their jobs is to stop the mouths of the gainsayers.
hmm
And you're not going to do that if you are, um, you know, soft spoken all the
Exactly.
time.
Exactly.
The Bible says, "Be angry." Right? Some people think that anger equals sin. Okay. Well, the Bible instructs us to be angry and sin not. So there's a line between anger and sin,
Absolutely.
but there's not an equal sign between anger and sin.
Exactly.
If you are angry about something that somebody is saying about a good church, a good preacher, a good school, a good brother or sister, um, that's something that can solicit a pretty passionate response.
hmm
And I think this is appropriate. I think this is appropriate.
Yeah.
Not all the time, you know,
Yeah.
but certainly if you get worked up for the right reason,
Yeah.
as Jesus did and Paul did and others did, if you get worked up for the right reason, hey, I think it's understandable
It's
and
valid.
not a sin.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And that passage you refer to is Ephesians 4:26.
Yes, sir. Just looking at
The
that.
yeah, be angry and sin not. Absolutely does. But now there's a difference though in being angry and being violent towards someone
Sure,
else. And
sure.
this, and I think this is it's a very important component because of the qualifications of an elder. Because at the end of the day, an elder, he represents the Lord's church. All of
Mm-hmm.
us, we all represent the Lord's church. But the Lord is specifically, he gives an elder the responsibility to lead the flock. And if he's
Mm-hmm.
leading by example and he's being violent and he's getting his temperament all worked up for the wrong
Mm-hmm.
reasons,
Mm-hmm.
then what kind of congregation are we going to have here? So
Not a good one, right? I
not
mean,
a good
it's
one.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Obviously, passion, enthusiasm, righteous anger, um,
hmm
all things that we should have. Letting that get out of control,
Yeah,
no.
it's not good. And you know, Dustin, the next thing we talk about here is not greedy for money.
Mm-hmm.
And this
Mm-hmm.
is an interesting one, Dustin. Not greedy for money. And I know throughout the New Testament, the Lord has advised us many times that the danger of putting money first in our lives. And I know I was actually teaching that yesterday on the Book of Acts. That's true about anything we put first in our lives, right? Whether it is money or anything else. But there is a reason why the Lord inspired Paul to write this down here, not greedy for money, in a church context. What are your thoughts, Dustin?
Well, you're exactly right, Matt. I mean, elders are oftentimes decision makers. They are decision makers. A lot of times, these decisions involve money.
Hmm.
Of course, back in the New Testament times, it may be slightly shocking to some people listening tonight, but back in New Testament times, elders may have been paid for their services. This is not a violation of God's will. It's okay for anybody who does anything that somebody else deems valuable to get paid for that. We're talking
Hmm.
legal stuff, of course. And so possibly, there was a payment component to this, but I think probably more practically for us, especially today, um, an elder being exploitative in his, um, role as an overseer. This needs to be something that is very out of his mind as an elder. Judas was a money guy,
It
um,
was.
and that had a harmful impact on him.
Hmm.
So money and stuff is a fact of life. It's a fact of a church's existence. I mean, there are things that have to be paid. There's income. There's outgo.
Hmm.
But an elder who is, obsessively motivated by this, mm, not not good.
Well, and you know, Dustin, I, it's definitely not the reality in the church in the upstate of South Carolina, but it is the reality in churches in Brazil. And you've been to
Mm,
Brazil multiple times,
mm, mm,
and you know that there are many denominational churches where the
mm,
pastors or elders or bishops, whatever you want to call them, um, the idea of materialism is preached from the pulpit over and over and over and over again. If you give God a $10,000 check, God is going to give you 20 next year. If you do your tithing instead of 10, you do 20. The Lord is He's gonna quadruple your money, and the
mm,
church
mm.
becomes a gambling institution. And God does not need none of these things that we have, Dustin. That's
You
something we see
do right.
very very obviously in Acts chapter 17 when Paul's speaking in Athens. He's saying, well, God, He does not need none of these temples. He does not need none of your silver or your gold. He's the creator of everything. And if an elder does not have his ducks on the roll when it comes to understanding that God is the provider and we're not here to seek for money, things can get out
Mhm.
of control. It really can,
Indeed.
Dustin. It really can.
Indeed. Anybody who's considering becoming an elder because, oh, I'll be able to get more money, that's entirely the wrong motive.
It is.
Or I'll be able to control the church's money. Again, entirely the wrong motive.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Sometimes these things do not get found out until after it's too late, and
Hmm.
and a church has a problem.
Yeah.
But it's the responsibility of the candidate to really search his soul.
Yeah.
And I think a congregation could ask a few, wisely worded questions and kind of see
Yeah.
how this guy's looking at money and finances.
So Dustin, you just said something interesting there, and I want to ask. You said something quite interesting there, because the we have candidates, and then we have the church and the church. Usually we'll say, well, if you have anything against, person X, Y, and Z, please let the current elders know, or let certain group of men know. Now, Dustin, I know the God He desires elders to be placed in the
Mm,
church, absolutely. But at the same time, we should just not pick anyone and not hurrying to,
Right.
oh, well, let's just get anyone there so we can get the ball rolling. That's not the
Right.
case at all. So there is a importance in a very importance in interviewing and understanding who that candidate is and looking the background to make sure we'll
Mhm.
make a good choice before that bomb explodes and then we got another problem in our hands.
No, you're exactly right. And we touched on in our last chat about elders how, one of the features of autonomy, self-governance, is a church with or without elders. A church is self-governing, self-ruling. They make in matters of expediency, not in matters of doctrine. In matters of expediency, they make decisions about how things will be at their congregation. And of course, we reference that a lot of churches have rules and guidelines and interview processes for preachers, for youth ministers, for secretaries and
Mm-hmm.
yard people and all the other stuff that a church does. And so yes, of course, it should be expected that a church will vet. I don't want to mix a political term into church business, but a
Mm-hmm.
church will, uh, the way the Bible puts it, what I'm thinking in my mind in Acts chapter 6, where the apostles tell the Christians to look out from among yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a job that needed to be done, and I think Acts chapter 6 is kind of a model for the installation of deacons, but this principle holds true. There was something that needed to be done, and the apostles' instruction was you go out from among yourselves and you find people qualified for this job.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's where it starts with an elder search. Of course, the big part that is also included in searching for elders is the need to conform with the qualifications in Scripture. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, somebody, you need to know somebody before you allow him to be an elder at the congregation. Somebody who walks through the door, in February and meets these qualifications, he's not the right guy to be an elder in March or April. You know what I mean? It takes some knowledge of and understanding of these men and his family before you take this next step.
Absolutely, Dustin. Absolutely. Now, moving forward, the next characteristic
Yeah.
we have here is someone who's gentle, a gentle
Mm.
person, according to New King James Version. Dustin, I think this is a key qualification. All of those are key, but this one is
Sure.
extremely important because the church is composed of people from various backgrounds, from various ages, and with people with various backgrounds and various problems as well. And if an elder is not gentle towards his flock, that could be a major issue to the church. It could turn
Bi-
out to be something a big problem, Dustin.
Indeed, indeed, and gentleness is a necessary quality in dealing with people you want to bring to the Lord. You know, an elder will have to stand up against false teaching, false teachers. An elder may have to get animated and a little bold and maybe even a little loud in some of the things that he says. We've talked about this, but an elder also is going to have to be extremely gentle, understanding sin in somebody else's life. And, we're told as soul winners, which all of us Christians are this, we're all soul winners, even though we're not all elders. We're told that when we go to a brother or sister in sin, we need to consider ourselves. Imagine ourselves in that other person's shoes. And if you don't have that level of empathy or compassion, then you're not a shepherd, you're not a pastor, you're not a leader, really just kind of a boss.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tell you what to do without any sort of understanding of what you're going through and, how what I'm saying to you affects you overall.
Mm-hmm.
Elders need to be sensitive to these things.
Absolutely. And the flock is never going to hear. The flock is never going to work on their side. And the church is not going to go anywhere, Dustin. I have to agree with you 100%. Now, Dustin, the next one is quarrelsome. And this one is similar to the violent, but there is a distinction here between these two words. Now, violent, Dustin, is someone who can end up getting on a physical fight with
Mm.
someone. Whereas a quarrelsome person, it's more in the debate, a person who is
Mhm.
always thinking that he or she is right. In this case, it's a
Mhm.
he. He always thinks
Mhm.
that he's right. He always thinks he knows everything. He got the reasons to never,
Hey, have you been talking to my wife, Matt? What's going on? I'm just teasing, just teasing, just teasing.
Yeah, I talked to Julie this past week before I left.
No, but you're right. When I think about somebody who's quarrelsome, it's quarrelsomeness is kind of what often precedes violence, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the button pusher,
Yep.
the person who is just going to be stubborn on purpose.
Yep.
Or how about this? In churches of Christ, we have a lot of these guys. Well, let me just play devil's advocate. Have you ever heard that
Hmm.
expression,
Yep.
Matt?
Oh yeah.
Devil's
Oh yeah.
advocate. So, as, as Christians, boy, we don't need to play devil's advocate too much.
No.
Um, this happens where somebody says some things, offers some debate, some interaction,
Hmm.
like for example, people would often do with what we earlier said about drinking. Oh,
Yep.
if we were teaching a Bible class, Matt, there would be lots of hands
Oh.
going up.
Oh yeah. That's when we get
Let me
crucified.
ask you, what
We
about
get
this? What about
crucified.
NyQuil? What about day? What? Okay, too much of that is a symptom of a quarrelsome spirit.
Hmm.
I just want to, I just kind of want to work the crowd up. One of the things that the Apostle Paul suffered from so much was the Judaizing teachers turning the crowds against him.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
and this was used to great effect to kind of hamper the Apostle Paul's ministry.
Hmm.
So
I give you a great
quarrels.
example.
Oh,
Acts chapter
please.
14. Acts chapter
Hmm.
14, when Paul arrives in Lystra, he preaches the gospel to that city that was filled with Gentiles. As he's there, Jews arrive, they turn the
Yes.
image. The Bible says that they thought that he was dead. They beat him up so bad. They thought that they were dead. They dragged his body, they left the body outside of the city, and then the apostles come and pick him up, and as the day he's not dead. He was just, you know, beaten really bad. But you see the Jews coming around and turning the crowns. And didn't they do
That's
that
right.
with Jesus when he
Oh, sure.
was in the hands of Pilate? Who do you want to go, Barnabas or Jesus? What did they say? They get
That's
the
right.
crowds going.
Mhm.
Now, you may think, well, in the church we don't have people like that. But I guess Paul is giving a big old warning here, isn't he?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, indeed, Matt. I mean, this is absolutely um, a trait that is alive and well today. I wish we didn't have this in the church, but my 20 plus years of ministry has unfortunately let me know that we do have people who are very dug into their position, and that they just want to pick it. They
Hmm.
want to needle it,
Hmm.
and this is usually done over. I'm just asking a question. I heard somebody say. Anytime
Hmm.
a Bible class comment begins with, "Well, what about?" or "I was talking to somebody and."
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying all of those are quarrelsome.
Yep.
And those of you watching, certainly keep on asking questions in Bible class, because as a Bible class teacher, we love that. We want that connection and exchange.
Absolutely.
But understand when, when maybe when maybe you're being quarrelsome about it.
Yep. Absolutely. Now, listen, covetous. New King James Version
Mm.
gives us the next version as someone who's not covetous. What is covetousness, Dustin? That's a fancy word we don't use on a regular basis.
Yeah, covetous. Yeah, it's greedy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, does desiring something that somebody has. You
The grass of
I
the
really,
neighbor, which is always greener.
yeah, yeah. I really like those little fancy ear things you got, Matt.
Oh yeah, there you
I
go,
don't have.
man.
Those are the Apple ones, right?
Apple ones, man. Apple
See,
ones.
I got the cheap ones here. So
You're being
it'd
covetous
be
now.
nice. But yeah, grass is always greener. Why does he live in that house? Why does he drive that car?
Back.
Why is his watch so fancy and expensive?
Yeah.
Your wife wants to know, when is she going to get a Coach bag or some fancy shoes or some, this sort of comparison that really doesn't bring us together. It divides us more apart.
Exactly. And a focus back on materialism, which should never be any of the reason why that man is placed into the leadership position in which he is placed. Justin, after covetousness, we have one who rules well his own house. Now, this one doesn't. And then the next point it says, having his children in submission with all reverence. And then verse 5 says, for if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he then be able to rule or to take care of the church of God?
All
Dustin,
right, right.
it is extremely important for that elder. And honestly, Dustin, I think looking back to the elder's family, we can get a big message whether
Sure.
he's falling to those qualifications or not.
Right. That's
Doesn't.
right. This is so many times paired with Titus 1:6, and talking there about leaving children. Um, I think a comparison of the two lets us know that the Lord is not, he's not interested necessarily in his ability to have children. Not talking about virility.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking
Mm-hmm.
about his ability to bring those who are those who are in his household, who look to him as their head, to guide them and bring them into the right relationship with the Lord. Um,
Absolutely.
and I sometimes think focusing on Timothy's account maybe gives more of that dimension than if we just get down to the nuts and bolts of what does believing mean, what does children mean.
Mm-hmm.
I'm perfectly competent to have those discussions,
Mm-hmm.
but what doesn't need to be lost, in all of those deep questions sometimes get brought up is, okay, here's the fact that the Lord is saying He wants a good manager of a household as a manager, shepherd, overseer,
Mm-hmm.
pastor of a congregation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
this is where I think Paul and the Lord are coming from on this point.
And questions must be raised, such as, is this man really up for the task of teaching his children the way of the Lord? Does
That's
this
it.
man set some time aside to study the Bible with his family during weekdays? Does this man treat his wife as as the Lord loved the church? And things like that. Thus, I think is so much. It says so much as to
It
how he
does.
will be able to do. Is he gentle with his children?
Hmm.
Is he? And then we go. Is he violent with his children? If he's
Yeah.
if he's violent with his own, I bet he's not going to think to be violent with one of the Lord's
Right.
the Lord's church members. So
Sure.
things like that is what I think says a lot about this verse. Now, last but not least, here we get to a point, the last and here it says not a notice in the
Mm-hmm.
faith, and then the Bible will give an explanation as to why. It says, least being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dustin, can you give us a practical example of maybe when they put a young man to be an elder and what ended up happening?
You know, in church.
So folks, seems like I lost connection with Dustin here for just a second. He's back now live. Dustin, but I was asking you, have you seen a congregation that ended up having a someone who's a novice in the faith, okay, to assume the position of an eldership? If you don't have an example, what are the danger of doing so? Can you give us
Mm,
practical examples?
indeed, you know, I was mentioning that typically in churches of Christ, what we do is go to the extremely elderly men
Hmm.
to look at them for being elders. Now,
Right.
these men clearly are very old in years.
Hmm.
Um, Now, the term novice is describing somebody who is fresh or somebody who is green or somebody who is new. So it's not a an age thing necessarily. You know,
Hmm.
somebody can be new in the faith and be
80
75
years
years
old.
old,
Sure,
80
absolutely.
years old, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Somebody can be very experienced and seasoned in the faith at at the age of 40, at the
Right.
age
Sure.
of 38.
Sure.
Jesus and Paul were very young men. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I think is pretty interesting just to think about along these lines, the life expectancy for our first century counterparts, the life expectancy for people in the first century was like 65.
Hmm.
We live today, we live much longer than any people have ever lived, maybe except before the flood. Um,
Right.
but today we live much longer.
Hmm.
So when the Lord says not a novice, he's not talking about somebody who is in the extreme oldest category of life. As a matter of fact, what your question was, you know, young people becoming elders. My answer started by saying, okay, what we usually do is we go to the very oldest members of a congregation and say, hey, we want you to be an elder. Clearly, these men are older, elderly. They often are not new in the faith. They've been Christians for decades. Often, also, what these men are retired
Hmm.
with grandkids all over the country and wives who like to go around and travel and
Yeah.
do things, seeing the family. So you you tell me, is somebody who is somebody who is older, but maybe also less focused
Hmm.
on the goings on of a congregation, is that man a better candidate because he's older,
Hmm.
better than somebody who's say 45, 50, 40?
Sure.
Um, we're not talking about somebody who's a new convert. In no way, shape, or form are we talking about somebody who's a new convert. But we're talking about somebody who is seasoned in the faith, and that's something that you can achieve, you know, depending on your level of intensity. I mean,
Yeah.
if you become a Christian, I became a Christian at age 16. I went to preaching school at age 17 or 18.
Hmm.
Then I went to a university and then graduate school and have been working as a minister for 20, 22, 23 years.
Hmm.
I, I, in no way, shape, or form this is just an example of one here. In no way, shape, or form would I consider myself a novice. In no way, shape, or form should anyone consider me to be a novice.
And you're
I'm
young
not
in
the.
age.
Well, thank you. I try.
Yes, no, but no. But I'm
I
being
mean,
honest. But you're young in age. Yeah.
relatively speaking, relatively
Yes.
speaking, sure.
Yes, you're young in
You
age.
know,
So, yeah, absolutely. So then,
about half the people I see on a daily basis call me sir. So I think I'm getting a little older. But
yeah,
age, young, old, it's all relative. What if you're in a congregation? What if you're in a congregation, the congregation where I preach at right now, more than half of the people at church are younger than me.
yeah,
We have a young congregation. Well, that is a variable. That is a factor.
yeah,
Um, so it is being a novice is not in relation to one's length of life. Being a novice is in relation to one's um, experience level.
experience. Yes.
Yeah.
So because
So so
if this
putting so
person,
so so making somebody an elder who lacks experience, this is very dangerous
it is.
for obvious reasons.
How
Because
they're
you
going to be
have
able to teach us then
that's
if they don't even know the doctrine,
that's right. That's right.
if their faith is not yet
That's right.
rooted deep down the
Mhm.
ground, it's not going to happen. It's
That's
not
right.
going to happen.
You're exactly right. So
Yeah.
somebody who is, somebody who is himself unsure of the key critical elements of Christianity, this person's not ready to be an elder, obviously. And this can happen. This does happen, as a matter of fact. And this is a warning to you churches, you Christians who are watching. Somebody can be baptized when he's 16 years old, and that faith can lay absolutely dormant
Hmm.
for 10, 20, 30 years. So what you have is a situation where somebody was baptized when he was 16. Now, let's say for round numbers, he's 56. Well, he's been a Christian for 40 years, but he's got the faith of a teenager
Hmm.
because he never fed or watered that faith.
Exactly.
So being a novice is not something you can tell just by looking at a guy or
Yeah.
asking somebody when were you born? If you were born before such and such a year, then you're not a
You're good to
novice.
go. Yeah.
Doesn't work like that. No,
Yeah.
sir.
And I think that points out the importance of what you said earlier today. Somewhat of an interview, sitting down, looking at the background.
Yes.
What congregation
Yes.
you were before? Why did you leave that congregation? Why are you here now? How long have you been here? Talk to us
That's
about
right.
your family. Let's hear your wife. And that's the throw point there that will give us a lot of answers. Last but not
Indeed.
least, verse 7, moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, those who are not yet Christians, lest he fall into the reproach in the same snare of the devil. Dustin, when I think about this, I think about someone. He's the shepherd. He's the example. The flock is looking to him. But not only that, this man may well be. Um, these group of men may well they will be at the end of the day the the leadership of the congregation, and people outside will know that they are leaders of that church. And now, can you imagine if this man he never pays his bills on time,
Right.
and and
Right.
and, and then people hear, oh, he's a church pastor. Man, I would
Yeah.
never go to his church.
That's right.
When I'm saying never go to his church, the church does not belong to him. The church belongs
Uh,
to
yes.
the
No.
world. This is the way
We
people will
yeah.
say, and thus that could damage and hurt the Lord's church
Big time.
image. And
Big.
so making sure that that person has a good reproach, a good report with those from outside,
Hmm.
that's key.
Hmm.
Because it will even make
Yeah.
it easier to bring the gospel to them
Yes.
eventually as that person becomes an elder.
Sometimes when we have this discussion with people who have been guilty of, look, all sin is sin, and every sin will keep somebody out of heaven. I mean,
Hmm.
armed robbery is a bad sin. so is skipping church. I mean,
Yep.
these are bad sins, okay? But take armed robbery, for example. You have somebody who lived a life of crime. um, he did a lot of the bad things you can imagine when we decide we're going to talk about the really bad sins.
Yes, sir.
And years later, he has completely changed his life, and he's asked about his background. He's asked about his reputation in this discussion selection process that we have been hinting at all along. Well, some tough decisions some tough decisions may be made. I mean, you have some things that you could have done in your life many years ago
Mm-hmm.
that will stick with you.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you have been a predator, if you have been violent against women, or violent against anybody, I mean, if you have done some bad things, lived a double life, these things may still damage your reputation many years later. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely,
Uh,
Dustin.
and and perhaps a congregation would say, well, you know, this is reputation, this is baggage that, you know, could bring harm to the church. Um, Sometimes the person who's being considered as an elder may get mad at that,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is just kind of a sign that maybe maybe you're making a good decision not to select that man if he's getting mad at
If
you.
he's getting mad, that's when we
Yeah.
touch on the quarrelsome right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the violent
And
piece.
it's not a matter of questioning somebody's salvation or somebody's forgiveness. Um, you know, the Apostle Paul killed Christians all over, and he was forgiven for that. So forgiveness is absolutely something that could be achieved and attained. Um, but it's also a matter. You know, there are people. There are people who have done things in their past that I would look at and I would say it would be tough for that guy to be an elder,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes me a bad person. I think everyone watching tonight can probably think of sins that if somebody committed those sins, I'd really have a hard time accepting him as an elder. We
Mm-hmm.
don't look for our elders to be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but we also want there to be a reputation there that is not going to harm the efforts of the Lord's church.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you know, people make mistakes all the time. Some people make really big mistakes. And
Yeah.
there is still a place in the church for those people. I mean, there's nobody in the church right now who's perfect. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a place in the church for everybody, regardless of someone's past. But maybe not
Absolutely.
everyone is the best candidate for an elder or being a youth minister. You know, there are some things that if you've done in your past, you you probably shouldn't be around kids. You shouldn't be a youth
Yeah.
minister.
And you know, Dustin, that shows us a major point. For those of you watching now, the qualifications of an elder is not something you're going to gain overnight. It
Yeah.
takes time. And that last point in verse 7, Dustin, is as you are diving into it, that simply tells us this evening that if you have the desire to become an elder, start preparing yourself today. Start thinking about your attitude and how that may in the future impact your position as an elder. Think about that now and ask for the Lord for wisdom, for growth,
Mm,
for maturity. Right now, it says, Lord, start to prepare me to be an elder right now. Start,
okay.
molding me and in my character, my morals, in my marriage, in my life, as in my relation with my kids. Help me to be the man you wanted me to be now and prepare myself to be an elder in the future. I think that's the way to go about it, Dustin.
Yes, you're right. You're exactly right, man. Because as you say, these are things that are a lifetime, a long lifetime in the making, you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and the time to think about it is now. I
It
mean,
is now.
you're not an elder, the time to be considering that is now. Now, it's not for everybody. If you're single and don't want to get married, if you're married, don't want to have kids, okay, life to live. But we understand what are some of the specific requirements for elders, and men and women need to be thinking about this. You know, it would be a shame, Matt, and this happens more times than just you. It would be a shame for somebody to be thinking about being an elder, be preparing to be an elder, be ready to be an elder, and the woman that he marries disqualified.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is a tragedy. That is a tragedy. So this is not just a passage of scripture for men. This is for everybody, because as we see, a lot of what God wants an elder to be is what He wants all of us to be at its
Absolutely.
base.
Absolutely. Dustin, I just can't thank you enough for joining us this evening on this very special Q&A as we talk about the qualifications of an elder. Appreciate you very much. I
Yes,
reckon
thank
next
you.
week our series on the book of Revelation. I'm thrilled to do that with you. That will be that'll keep us in our toes. Have to
Yeah.
study more throughout the next couple of days. But I'm definitely looking forward to that. Appreciate you very much. Good, wonderful rest of your week, and I look
You
forward
too,
to
man.
seeing you
God
right
bless.
here next week. Okay.
Sounds good, brother.
Thank you, Dustin. You have a good one out.